Welcome to this episode of Insights with Ovationz. I am your host, Aaron Ellis. I am joined today by Peter Shankman. Now, Peter is a seasoned entrepreneur, a keynote speaker, a 6-time best-selling author, an expert in neurodiversity in the workplace. He's recognized worldwide as an influencer for his radical new ways of thinking about the customer experience, social media, PR marketing, advertising, and more, working with companies like Adobe, Sylvania, Thule, and many, many more. In the words of New York Times, Peter is a rock star who knows everything about social media and then some. Now, I'm not done. This is where I think it's kind of gets crazy. Along with all of his professional accolades, he's a 2-time Ironman triathlete. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but I think you've run 25 marathons, skydived 500 times. And honestly, if that's not enough, the main thing that's near and dear to my heart is you're a single dad to a 10-year-old girl. I am a single dad to a 9-year-old girl. So welcome to the show, Peter. I'm excited to hear more.
Thanks. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, so let's dive into some of this stuff. Like as I was reading about you, right, I'm thinking about, and I'm sure you hear some of this, like the people who are like, have come to me like, you achieved all of you've achieved, and you also are raising kids, and you've also traveled the world, you've also got to do this stuff. And I'm like, man, Peter's done 500 skydiving. He's done 25 marathons, 2 Ironmans. Like, let's start there with the personal you. Like, how are you doing all that? Like, what has allowed you to be able to achieve both personal and professional at that level?
The ADHD brain, pretty much. The ability to constantly be never satisfied, right? Always wanting to try something new, to come up with a new idea. It's the ability to want to see what else is out there, I think is sort of the best way to put it.
Yeah. I always tell people I'm forever curious. I'm always curious, right? So I'm always driven to learn more, see more. Now, is there any time in your life where this was actually, I know obviously a lot of people, when I talk about ADHD or any neurodiversity, right? We talked before, I have ASD, we talked about that before, but is there a time in your life where you didn't understand this, where it was actually not a superpower for you, where it was actually a hindrance?
Yeah, the majority of my life, up until I turned about 30, 35. Growing up in the New York City public schools, I didn't have ADHD. I had sit down, you're disrupting the class disease. And it took quite some time to start to understand what it was and what the difference was and why it was, driving me crazy and why I kept getting in trouble, all this stuff, and it wasn't until I finally got diagnosed, everything started to make sense. I mean, I changed my life in the respect that I was using my ADHD for good and to sort of live my life better, but I didn't know it. I just thought I was weird. So things started to make a little more sense over time.
Very cool. Now, is that the primary driver to what you're doing now, would you say, in business?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the majority of what I do now is, perfect example, I decided to start a company 4 days ago, and it's already up and running, and we have over 9,000 users. So it's like those kind of.
I'm just going to start another company. I love it.
Some people, think, hey, maybe I should do something, whatever. I think, yeah, let's start another company. It's crazy how this works, but yeah, it's those are the kind of things that that's how our brain works. It's much more fun.
So what are you finding in the workplace? I know I've interviewed a handful of people recently, and I've had a lot more people reaching out to me as they've seen some of the interviews I've done with people who are focusing on neurodiversity, which actually kind of bridged from the DEI, and actually it kind of looped into that for a little while. But what are you finding as far as the problems you're encountering in companies and the receptiveness? I'm curious on your experience with that, since you're kind of in the trenches with it right now.
So one of the things about neurodiversity is that people are starting to understand it a little better and starting to realize that there's incredible benefits to having different cognitive abilities on your team. And so what that means is that companies are starting to understand that looking at neurodiversity as a gift instead of a curse is actually tremendously beneficial.
Totally makes sense. There's a group of friends of mine who all are on the spectrum in some way with autism. And we were one day talking about, one of them brought up how like there's neurodivergent and neurotypical. And he's like, us neurodivergent people look at people and we get confused when they're neurotypical. We just say typical, just typical, like the expression typical. So it's kind of funny. But okay, so you also have a podcast, Faster Than Normal, and my understanding that's the number one podcast on HD or ADHD. So let's talk about that. Like what do you cover on there? How has it become number one? Tell us more about that podcast.
So it's called Faster Than Normal, and it's based on the best-selling book that I wrote of the same name. We talk to people from all over the world who have ADHD, and we look at it. These people look at ADHD as a gift, not a curse. We've had the band Shinedown, we've had governors, we've had the founder of JetBlue, we've had all these people who understand that their differently wired brains are actually a benefit to them, and they come on and tell their story. And what's wonderful about that is that it allows people who might have the same brain but don't necessarily see it as a gift to realize that it is possible for them to succeed, to realize that it is it's not a death sentence, right? It doesn't mean that you're broken.
Yeah. You mentioned Shinedown. Brent's a great friend of mine, singer Shinedown.
Ah.
They got signed to Atlantic at the same time I was signed to Warner Brothers.
Cool.
So yeah, toured with them, written with them. Those are great. Those guys, honestly, just let's give a little shout out because they recently broke the Beatles record for number one songs.
Cool.
That's pretty crazy for a band, like especially a rock band like that. So anyway, very cool. Another connection point. So share with me and the listeners here about, maybe we can go in a little more into the weeds with how you're doing this with organizations and what you're actually doing. When you go into an organization, what problems are you able to identify that you know immediately are potentially due to their misunderstanding of or lack of knowledge around neurodiversity? And then what are you doing to help them move the needle and change their dynamics and maybe some of the results that you've seen?
One of the things that were, for instance, I worked with a company, I won't name it, but I worked with a big company who people were coming back into the office and they were trying to, after spending 2 years of working from home, the neurodiverse were coming back in the office and sort of to this rude awakening of, oh my God, people are bothering me. And one of the things that they were having a problem with is that productivity was slowing down again. It had skyrocketed during COVID because people were home and neurodiverse brains could work any way they wanted. Coming back to the office, it was a little harder to do that. So one of the things we implemented was a stoplight system. We simply put a small, it was an open desk policy. So basically you came into the office and sat wherever you wanted. And we put a small red light, yellow light, green light, traffic light on the top of each person's cubicle on the desk. And if you chose your light based on your mood and the work you were doing. So if it was a red light, it meant, hey, I'm heads down, do not bother me, I'm in that work zone. If it's yellow, bother me if it's important. If it's green, come on and have a chat. And everyone, not just those with neurodiversity, every brain loved it because it allowed for a rising tide to raise all boats. People understood, hey, this guy's busy, I won't bother him. Or this woman says, I can talk to her now, now's a good time. And it changed the whole dynamic of the company because all of a sudden people didn't mind coming back to the office. They weren't being bothered as much. It was a game changer for them. So it's things like that. It's coming up with ways that companies can understand how things benefit and how these small little ideas can help everyone. And we're doing this for companies big and small. A lot of financial companies, a lot of tech companies as well. So it's really starting to grow. It's exciting.
Wow, I love that idea. I think that should be embraced all over the place, actually. And what came to mind was it allows people too who might not necessarily know when to speak up, and they also might have some kind of hang-up. So like when somebody comes and interrupts, they don't want to be rude, right? But it allows them to use that system without having to explain why they're doing it. And people go, oh, they must be working hard. Oh, they must need to be non-disturbed right now, right? Oh, they're open for questions right now. That's great. I think that's amazing just for communication efficiencies alone, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Well, let me ask you another question that's related. That's been something that has been a hot topic, obviously since COVID and stuff, and people going back to work. What do you feel about remote work as opposed to everybody has to be there? And do you have any perspective on does it one or the other work better for neurodivergent or neurotypical, or can it be something that is a blanket option? Just thoughts on that.
It really depends on the person. There's some people who are neurodiverse who absolutely love being surrounded by other people. I am not one of those people. I find it much easier to work when I'm by myself, when I'm working alone, when I'm in an office. I mean, right now it's me and my dog, and we are getting along fine. On the flip side, I can hang out if I need to. I can be in an office with other people and just put on my noise canceling headphones and go to work. So it really depends on what the specific person needs and when they need it. But at the end of the day, what you're looking at is you want a workplace to be accessible and usable by all. Essentially, you want it to be neuro-inclusive, not neurodiverse friendly or neuro-atypical or typical, but neuro-inclusive, which means that you are helping people both with faster brains and regular brains do their jobs better.
I like that. Now, not with this topic, but other topics that have been similar to this, bringing in a change into an organization that's done things a certain way for so long. Are you finding any sort of resistance, or maybe you've actually found some easier ways to get that to be embraced? And let me frame this a little bit better, potentially, where a company's done something a certain way, and we could relate this to everybody has to work in the office, and then, some people want to work at home. But anything where they have like a flat rule that doesn't work anymore because people are different, what have you found is a way to help companies embrace that? And one other thing came to mind is like when I've tried to bring in concepts like that, they're like, how do we do that? When they start to think they have to teach everybody or treat everybody as an individual, they don't know how to do that, right? You follow me?
It's funny. I work with a bunch of companies, helping them handle customer experience as well, and they're always afraid that if they do something for one person, they have to do it for everyone, things like that. And the big question is, why wouldn't you? Right? If you can figure out a way to do something that does not become a cost factor, right? In other words, if you look at Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons, every employee at Ritz-Carlton has the ability on the spot to spend up to $2,500 to make a guest's problem correct without needing approval from their manager. And companies think, oh my God, we'd never give that permission. They'd abuse the fact of the matter is they rarely use that, because they know that their ability to fix a problem is theirs and theirs alone. They usually come up with ways to do it that doesn't involve having to spend that much money. So, if you give your employees the rope, chances are they're not going to hang themselves. Chances are they're going to generate something that benefits everyone with that rope. And the problem is that companies are still too afraid to do that. So a lot of what I do is work with companies to explain to them the benefits and sort of run trial balloons out there to show that, hey, this is working and this is beneficial. And, it's a case-by-case basis, because a lot of companies are still very scared to do that. But when you find the value in it, and when they start to see the value in it, they immediately understand there's benefit and they get it. It's like watching a light bulb.
Yeah, I love that. That you said that very, very well. So let's apply that same question or same thought towards what's going on in the world with AI. Now, where does neurodiversity, or like how you said it, neuro-inclusive, so neuro-inclusivity, where does that play a role with AI?
AI is phenomenal in that regard, because one of the big things about neurodiversity is that projects, at least for someone like me with ADHD, projects look way too big to start, right? Oh my God, I can't do that. It's too much work. It's too big. I don't know where to start. I wouldn't know where to start. It's the premise of eating the elephant, right? One bite at a time. And AI allows us, I wouldn't use AI to write something or to create something new or whatever, but the beauty of AI is it does give us the ability to start something. Hey, ChatGPT, can you please write the first 2 paragraphs for this idea? Okay, well, now the first 2 paragraphs are written. They might not be perfect, but they're on paper. All of a sudden, it's not that big of a project anymore.
Yeah, just based on how you started that explanation too. I know people who go in there and they have a project in front of them, and they'll explain the project and say, "Please break this down into simple steps for me. Where should I start?" And it'll literally give them some options, right? And so it doesn't look so overwhelming then when they look at it from that perspective. I think that's great how you said that. And I agree. Like if I use it for writing anything, I always have to obviously, and I recommend everybody looks at it, make sure it's in their voice, right? And that's how they would actually speak, right? Because you can tell when something's written like that, especially if you know the person and they send you. I can't at least something AI generated. I'm like, that's not even you talking. You did it. You used ChatGPT, right? So that's very cool. Let's jump into the personal stuff here. And tell us about your personal you. And there's plenty of stuff we can talk about here, but there's one question I have on this, and I'll save it till the end unless you bring it up. But let's talk about like how the marathons, the skydiving, what's driven you to do that, and tell us a little about your daughter.
So marathons, skydiving, all that kind of stuff is the quest for dopamine. What's the great line from Point Break? Some people snort for it, jab a vein for it. All you got to do is jump. It is 100% dopamine, 100% adrenaline, 100% serotonin. And when you're neurodiverse, your brain makes about 25% less of those chemicals. And so running or getting on the Peloton for an hour or skydiving or whatever gives me that boost that I need. So I will not start my day in the morning without doing at least an hour bike ride. And sometimes that means, if I have an early flight, sometimes, on the bike as early as 3 a.m. But I do it because I'm better for it than if I don't do it. I remember my daughter she's 11, going to be 11 next month. When she was 4, she woke up one day, she came in the kitchen, I was having a cup of coffee, and we were talking, and she goes, "Daddy, did you go on your bike today?" I go, "No, honey, I was tired. I took the morning." She goes, "I know you're not as happy." And so at 4 years old, she was able to tell the difference between a brain that gets the chemicals it needs versus not. So for me, it really is about understanding how those chemicals benefit me and give me what I need. And so, that's how I discovered skydiving. That's how I discovered running. And it's all the things that drive my mother crazy are usually the things that I love to do.
Yeah, I love the way you put that because I love skydiving. I'm an adrenaline junkie. It's interesting what you said. I never thought of it. I just connected a dot in my own mind. When I've gone and done, like, I have a big event to do, like a 3-day workshop I'm doing, or a mastermind I'm doing, or I was a host of a television show back in 2019. And before we did the initial filming in this mansion in Vegas with all the contestants, I went a day early and said, what am I going to do I took it as grounding myself and centering myself. So what I did is I got in one of the stunt planes and did end over end rolls and drops and spins and barrel rolls and stuff, and just massive adrenaline rush, which kind of, for some reason, that always kind of sinks me in and links me into what I need to be for the next 3, 4, 5 days.
Funny thing is
I was doing something like that.
And the funny thing, you mentioned Vegas. The funny thing is Vegas, my speaking keynote writer is very simple. I'll show up, you pay me, you pay for my travel, except in Vegas. In Vegas, I'll only do a lunchtime keynote, so I can fly in and out the same day. Or if you want me for a morning or an evening keynote, you have to fly me to LA either the day before and then fly me out to Vegas at 5 a.m. the day of, or an evening keynote, you fly me in that afternoon and fly me out late. Because knowing myself and knowing how my brain works, Vegas is designed to feed into your dopamine receptors. The problem is it's designed to feed into your dopamine receptors at the expense of your wallet, at the expense of, for gambling or for whatever. Vegas is not a safe place for me. Yeah. Right. And so I am well aware of that. So you put these rules into place to allow you to function at your best. I know that if I have to have 3 hours to kill unsupervised in Las Vegas, I will wind up at the blackjack table. Not that I'm a gambling addict or anything like that, but just because it's there and there's a very strong allure. Because it's interesting. Dopamine is actually created not when you do the actual thing, not when you actually jump out of the plane. Dopamine is actually created on the ride up to altitude, because dopamine is a trigger drug, a trigger chemical that is triggered by the thought of doing something exciting. So the premise of riding up in that plane to altitude and jumping out, by the time you jump out, you already have all the dopamine. That's how you focus, and don't forget to open your parachute. So when I land in Las Vegas and I'm walking into the Bellagio or whatever to give my keynote, my dopamine has already risen because I know there are blackjack tables there, there's slot machines there. And so to keep myself on track and on time, okay, let's go right to the speech. Let's let's get away from the casino. Let's go here and give the talk and then go home. As opposed to if I have 3 hours, I'm going to go to the blackjack table whether I think I am or not, because
I totally relate. Yeah, I love just to let everybody know. Go back and listen. And before Peter and I start talking about all the crazy adrenaline junkie things that we do, and he did mention just getting on the Peloton bike in the morning for an hour to give a similar effect. So you don't have to go jump out of a plane like we will and stuff like that to get that effect. You can just do some exercise and get your body moving and stuff. So I like to bring that up because people are like, I could never do that, Aaron. Yeah, but you can do something. So anyway, we're close to time here. I had one final question. Two final questions. One is, I loved when I read your daughter and your 3-year-old dog refuse you access to the couch. I just cracked up when I read that. So quick 30 seconds on that. Like, that was a funny statement.
So I'm literally looking over at my couch right here, and the dog is sleeping dead center in the middle of it, allowing me no room to sit. And when my daughter is home from school, she occupies that side of the couch. So yeah, I'm basically relegated to like either sitting in front of my computer all night or going into my room. Welcome to the world.
Like, my kids are either on top of me or they on the couch. It's good. I have to get on there first, and then they just climb on top of me. So, well, final quick question, Peter. Is there anything, final thought you want to leave with the world? There's something you're doing you want to point them towards that you want to make sure you share today?
Neurodiversity is a gift, not a curse. And, for everyone who spends a lot of time complaining they don't like where they are in life or at the job or, whatever, I always look at it along the lines of, if you don't like where you are, move, because you're not a tree. Life is too short, and every day, and not to go all trite, but every day could be your last. So why are you not taking advantage of every single thing? And if you're not happy, move.
Love it. All right, everybody. This has been another episode of Insights with Ovationz. You can check out Peter on ovationz.com, as well as there's a lot more coming. When we do post this, you'll see all of other Peter's socials and ways you can connect with him and watch for him in our epic series. And he's also available as a keynote with specifics. I love that you shared that. And panelists, we will see you on the next episode. Thank you, Peter.